Hey guys, welcome. Thank you for joining. This is the Oracle Autonomous Database Learning Lounge. I'm Marco Serasibia, part of the product management team for Autonomous Database. And today we're going to have a very, very cool session on the Oracle Data Safe, right? So how to secure and maintain security on your Autonomous Database, right? So Bettina Schaeumer, she's a senior principal product manager, and she's joining us today to explain everything about Oracle Data Safe, how easy and quickly and conveniently you can run it from Autonomous Database. And she's going to explain, how it actually provides a security control center for everything like configuration risks, like identifying highly, privileged database users, managing auditing records, and all of these kind of things, right? So for the session today, we have an open Q&A. So at any time, if you guys have questions, make sure to type them in Q&A, okay? So we're going to use chat to send you guys link and show you links, but make sure to type your question in Q&A so that the product managers can actually answer you, okay? And we're going to make sure that the recording is available probably by the end of the week. So here are some important links that I would like you guys to bookmark. So I'm just sharing with you guys right now in chat. So our new page, the Get Started with Autonomous Database, that has all of the different types of things you guys, imagine that you need, right? So things like demos, LiveLabs, right? Blogs. So all of that information concentrated there. Please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and also on X, Twitter. And, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us in Stack Overflow. All right. All right.
Yeah, okay.
That's great. So one thing before I pass the ball to Bettina, I just wanted to thank you guys for a great year. So, the Autonomous Database Learning Lounge has been really a success in 2023. So I'm looking forward to 2024. We've had, 4,100 total attendees on our sessions. So we right now have more than 1,600 subscribers. And we've had a total of 524 questions, which is great. I mean, we've had, for every topic we do, we have more than 300 people in average in attendance. So that's great. Again, really appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining the sessions this year. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share your screen. And thank you very much for joining us today so early on your time zone, Bettina. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Okay, so thanks again for having me, Marcus. And yeah, good morning, everyone. At least on my side here, it's still morning. It's still dark outside, so wherever you are, good morning, good day. And thanks for joining our session and for your interest here. As Marcus said, we would like to talk about Data Safe and show you how you can use Data Safe for your autonomous databases today. What I'm planning to do is I'll show you a couple of slides just for level setting to understand, so you have a good understanding of what is Data Safe, especially for those people who haven't heard about Data Safe before or, just, heard briefly about it. And then I would like to do a live demo so that you get a better feeling of what Data Safe is, how it looks like, etc., and how you can leverage that. Yeah, my name is Bettina Schaeumer. As Marcus said, I'm part of the product management team for database security and responsible for Data Safe. And we also have one of my colleagues on the call, Pedro Lopez. So he's also going to help with Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to answer ask them in the Q&A section, and then we will try to address those. Good. I know this is a call for autonomous. So if you have an autonomous database, as I mentioned, obviously you can use that for with Data Safe and secure or securely configure your database with the help of Data Safe. But also if you have any other Oracle database, you can leverage Data Safe. So Data Safe is really for all your Oracle databases. It doesn't matter where they're running, if they're in the cloud, in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, if you have them in the cloud at customer, if you have any databases on premises or in any other cloud environment, this is really one tool securing all your Oracle databases. Good. With that, let's get started. So if we think about the data you're storing in the database, so what we're seeing really these days, data is really asset number one, right? It's really valuable asset. Your customer, you have your customer data, you might have logistics information stored in your database, you have all the vendors, etc. So you really rely on all these data. But the problem is, if it's not well protected, it could also become an issue, right? And a liability. And what we're seeing across the globe, obviously, is cybercrime is increasing. Unfortunately, there's hardly any week where we don't see a story in the press where some prominent company exposed their customer data or was hacked, and customer data was found. And obviously, if you have a hacker attack, what are they attacking? They are trying to get to the database, right? Because that's where you have all your data concentrated in one place, and that's what they're trying to go after. So yes, we need to make sure our database is well secured, that it's configured securely, etc. But then on the other side, we also have to deal with all these new data protection, data privacy regulations or laws. Most prominent one was probably GDPR when they started with that in Europe. Here in California, we have the CCPA, the Consumer Privacy Act. And then across the states, across the globe, we really see more and more of those regulations coming up. So you need to be really familiar with where you're storing sensitive information, how to protect the sensitive information. What if someone, has a right to be forgotten? How do you identify where that information is stored, etc.? So more than ever, we need to make sure our databases are secured. More than ever, we need to understand where sensitive information is stored. If we look at the autonomous database, obviously, we're trying to address a lot of the security aspects. So with an autonomous database, obviously, your data is always encrypted. We're applying security patches automatically, making sure administrators cannot snoop into your data, etc. But even with an autonomous database, there's still something what we call the customer responsibility, right? Because only you can make sure that you securely configure your database, that you're not making any changes that would introduce any unnecessary risk. You are the one who has to decide what are the users we need on this database, what are their privileges they need. Do I have any highly privileged users? Do you need to audit certain activities? Do you need to audit certain users? If you do, how do you manage these audit records? What type of sensitive information do you have? How do you protect it in your productive environment, but especially also in your non-productive environment? So those are some of the customer responsibilities. And to help with that, that's why we introduced DataSafe. We introduced it now over 4 years ago in 2019. And what we're trying to do is really giving you a unified security control center, identifying any risk around the configuration of your database, the data that you're storing in the database, so the sensitivity of the data you're storing in the database, the users accessing the database. And what we're also trying to do here, one of our design principles is making sure you can use DataSafe without needing any special expertise. So no security special expertise is needed. You can just go ahead, register your database in DataSafe, and then get immediate insights into any risks that we have identified. Before I get started with, the features in DataSafe and, how to use it, etc., just wanted to give you an overview of some of the use cases we're seeing. Those are just some examples here, but very common ones across our customer base. So first one, definitely, and I would say this is the number one that we're seeing, is really hardening the security posture of your database. Really making sure you're securely configuring your database, making sure you also get to know if someone is changing anything. So really detecting configuration drift, making sure if someone makes any changes, is this an unnecessary risk? Is this okay? Understand the user risk also, right? What type of users do you have on your environment, on your database? Are they highly privileged? What is the damage to the data they could do if any of those accounts would get compromised? Do you have to monitor certain activities? So this is what you can do to harden the security posture of your database. Then when it comes to sensitive data, obviously it's understanding where your sensitive data is stored. How do you protect sensitive data? You might have to, you might have a production environment, obviously, and typically you make sure that, users only have the access that they need for their daily task. But then if you take a copy of your production database, maybe for development, for training, for Q&A or something, do you really still have the same role concept? Do you really make sure that, sensitive information is not exposed in these non-production environments. Because if you think about a development environment, typically the developers have way more privileges than a normal user would have. They would be, or they could access any sensitive information. So what you want to do is protect that information, mask that information before you let your users onto those non-production environments. Then when it comes to audit regulations or corporate policies that your customers might have to follow, here it's important to know what type of activities do you need to monitor? How long do you have to keep your audit records? Where do you store your audit records? How do you make sure nobody goes into the database and disabling audit policies or deleting data that you have in your environment? And then another interesting use case that we're seeing is securely moving your application from development to production. So if you have any development in-house, typically when you start with the application, you have very broad privileges. Your developers typically have, maybe they even have DBA privileges when they get started. And then when you're done and you're ready to move this to production to really have users on your environment, what do you need to do? What sensitive information do you have? Do you need to track activity for those objects? Now, all of a sudden, we have to think about securely configuring the database, thinking about roles and privileges on, who's accessing your database, etc. Good.
And Bettina, there's a person here asking the concept. I think it's not very well known, right? The right to be forgotten.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's just a lot of the regulations like GDPR or also others, they have this where the consumer basically has a right to be forgotten. So if a consumer comes to you saying, hey, I want you to delete all the information that you have about me, right? That is just, in some of those regulations, that's part of it. So then I need to know, where do I store personal information of my consumers, right? Or my customers. So that's what meant with the right to be forgotten. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. Good. In terms of features, obviously, DataSafe is a cloud service, so we're providing new capabilities, new features all the time. So basically, we're launching new capabilities every week, sometimes every other week. But what you see here on the screen, these are really the main features in DataSafe right now, the main 6 features we have. Security assessment, this is what I talked about, really helps you quickly to evaluate the security posture of your database and also making sure you're preventing any configuration drift. Then we have user assessment, which helps you identify your highly privileged users. You can review what privileges, what roles they were granted to these users. You can check their user activity on the database. And also here you can set up notifications if any user changes were done on the database, any entitlement changes, any new users were introduced in on the database, so that you can review also their roles and privileges. Then we have activity auditing. First of all, activity auditing helps you to store or to collect and then centrally store your audit records. And especially if you're using autonomous database, in an autonomous database, your audit records are only kept for a couple of weeks. I want to say it's 2 weeks, and then they're gone. So if you have to keep your audit records for a longer time, you can just register it in DataSafe, start the audit collection, and you will see there's, DataSafe comes included with your autonomous subscription, so that you can centrally store them, and you just let us know how long you want to keep them, and we'll manage that for you. On the other hand, we also have predefined, audit reports that help you analyze the data. If you just get started, we have predefined audit policies, as some recommendations here on what you could get started with auditing. Then the newest feature, SQL Firewall, that is not yet available on autonomous database, and that the reason for that is that SQL Firewall, you might have learned about it if you heard about the 23C database. So SQL Firewall is a new feature in the 23C target database. And here in DataSafe, we built a UI on top of that to easily configure the SQL Firewall if you have a 23C database. So not yet available in Autonomous, but as soon as Autonomous is available on 23C, then you can also leverage that feature here. Or if you already have maybe a base database, 23C, then you can also leverage that. And then when it comes to sensitive data, first of all, we offer sensitive data discovery. It comes with over 150 predefined sensitive data types. You can also, if you have any requirements that we don't offer out of the box, you can also extend that model. So you can also create your own sensitive types, for instance. And then last but not least, we have data masking. So this is what I mentioned before. If you have any non-production environments, this is where data masking comes in. It can help you really replacing the sensitive information with realistic looking data, but not exposing any real data. In terms of availability, as I mentioned that earlier, so DataSafe is available for all your Oracle databases. It doesn't matter where they're running. If you have an autonomous database, that would be the little cloud on the left. So if you have any Oracle Cloud database in OCI, including an autonomous database, then as I mentioned, DataSafe is included in your subscription. If you have any cloud at customer databases, that's the same. DataSafe comes included with that. If you still have on-premises databases, if you have any databases running in any other cloud environment or databases on compute, then there is a monthly charge for those databases. And as you can see, we also added Amazon RDS for Oracle support this summer. So if you not just have databases on OCI, but maybe also RDS database, you can also manage that in DataSafe. And then I mentioned the audit collection. So what we're doing also for the audit collection is we're including up to 1 million audit records per database per month, free of charge in DataSafe. So if you have an autonomous database, you have audit records, you can collect them in DataSafe. There's no charge, only if you generate more than 1 million audit records in per database per month, and there would be a small fee, as you can see here. What we're seeing with most of our database customers, they're well under this free limit. There are some critical databases where more has to be tracked that are over that free limit, but for most use cases, that is enough. Good. With that, I would like to have a quick look into into the other features, a little bit more in detail, and then we'll move over to the live demo. So security assessment, what we're doing here is we're checking all, very comprehensive check actually, for the configuration of your data. And what we're doing here is we're checking against, best practices from GDPR. We're checking against rules from the technical implementation guide from the Center of Internet Security. And then you get a really comprehensive report where we show you where we found any risk. And if you think about the Oracle database, there are probably hundreds of settings that have, an impact on the security of your database. So this is what we're checking. You get a landscape-wide view, a fleet view, where we're showing you where did we find any high risk in your entire database fleet? What are those high risks? Which databases are impacted by that risk? Give you more information on how to remediate the risk. What is that risk? Why is it a risk? And how to remediate the risk. And then we're encouraging you, obviously, to go over those high risk, those medium risk, low risk. Make sure you make changes. Make sure you're hardening the posture here of your database. And then once you have your database in a good state where you feel like, yes, this looks good, configuration, this is what I want, then what you can do is you can establish a baseline. And then what we're doing every time we're running a new assessment, we're comparing it against the baseline. And then what you will see is if there's any change, it will be called out. So you see, yes, this database now drifts from the baseline. This is what has changed. You get a comparison report, and you can also set up notifications so that you don't have to check the databases every day, every week or so, but you get notified if something has changed. User risk assessment. So here, this is where we analyze or where we look at all the users and their privileges, their roles in the database, where we're trying to see, what is a potential risk level of this user. And again, this is just a potential risk level if any of those users would get compromised or if any of those users would go rogue. But what we're doing is here, we're checking the combination of roles, privileges these users have. We give you a potential risk level with critical, high, medium, low. And again, the idea is not to get rid of any, of all database users that might have a critical risk level or high risk level, because you will always have some DBAs that are highly privileged, or you will have application users who have access to, a lot of data. But it gives you a good categorization here of those users. Maybe you want to do additional measurements, like, you might want to track certain user activity, etc. What you also get, and you see that on top, and we'll see that in the live demo also, is more information on which of my users, are privileged, like who of my user are DBAs, who has DV admin privileges, audit admin privileges. Do I have any users who haven't logged into my database in a long time? Would be a good idea maybe to log those users, etc. And once you have a good understanding of your users, you know who your users are, what roles, what privileges they have, then also here you can set a baseline. And then same here, every week we're running a new assessment, or basically by default, we're running assessments every week. You can also change that frequency. You can run it daily, you can run it monthly, whatever makes sense in your environment. But every time we're running a new assessment, we're comparing it against the baseline. Also here, if anything is changing, if there is new users on my database, any users were removed, if any users have new entitlements or any other changes, you see that in the comparison report. And also here, you can set up notifications if there are any changes. One thing we added, I want to say earlier this year, is the user profile inside. So this is also really helpful. If you think about it, the profile has a lot of parameters that might also impact, how secure your database is. If you think about, do I allow unlimited failed logins? Do I have a restriction saying, hey, after 5 failed logins, I'm locking my users, etc. So this is defined in the user profiles. And what we're doing in DataSafe is we're giving you an overview of all the profiles in your database, which users are assigned to which profile, what are the characteristics of each profile, so that you can also tighten your profiles here. Then moving over to auditing. So user activity auditing, as I mentioned earlier, so has 2 parts. It has the audit collection. So you can start just the audit collection in DataSafe, and we're picking up your audit records from your autonomous database or any other Oracle database that you register in DataSafe. We're storing it centrally in DataSafe. You have predefined audit reports to analyze the data. You can also have pretty comprehensive filter capabilities that you can add. So you can also build your own custom reports. And you just let us know how long you want to keep your records, and then we'll manage that. What you also see in DataSafe is what are the audit policies that are on my database, that were created on my database, that are enabled on my database, or that are disabled on my database. You can also, make changes from here. You can enable certain policies. You can provision that back to your database. If you haven't started really with auditing, you see we have some recommendations here on basic audit policies that you could enable, or admin activity auditing. And then also an autonomous database already comes with predefined audit policies. So you would see that also here in DataSafe on which of those are activated or enabled, which are disabled right now. Especially helpful for customers who just get started with audit policies is the audit insights in DataSafe. So what you can do here is really fine-tuning, or it helps you to fine-tune your policies. So here what you have is, we break down what is the volume really by policies, what is the volume by schemas we're tracking, etc. So if you enabled certain policies and now all of a sudden you see a lot of volume of audit records and you want to see where's this volume coming from, this is what helps you. Maybe it's a certain audit policy where all of a sudden you're tracking every single user, every single activity. So obviously it would be shown here in the insights. And then you can see where's this audit volume coming from? Do I want to revisit those policies? Do I want to fine tune those policies? Do I really need everything that I'm tracking there? But definitely a big help here. And then in terms of how long you want to keep your audit records, we have these retention periods that you can configure yourself. So you can either configure the retention periods globally for all your target databases, or you can also go ahead and, configure it or specify it directly for a single target database. Let's say you have a very critical database where you want to keep your audit records longer, maybe for 5 years or 7 years, then you can set that as well. By default, we allow you to, out of the box, we allow you to keep your audit records in data safe for up to 7 years. Typically, you can keep your audit records in the online or online in data safe for up to 1 year. And then we also offer an archive for up to 6 additional years. So as I said, you just configure that, how long you want to keep it. The archive is fully managed by DataSafe. You can always bring back data from the archive to analyze in DataSafe very easily. And the good news here is there is no additional fee for your audit records, depending on how long you keep it. So if you keep your audit records for 2 months or 2 years or 5 years or 7 years, there is no additional fee in DataSafe. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have autonomous database, you want to use auditing, your audit records are only kept for a few weeks, so would be a good idea to start the audit collection.
Excellent. And we have an interesting question here. Does DataSafe make some recommendations about audit policies to be configured? I think you're going to show that, right, in your demo later.
Yeah. So it comes with some recommendations to, on policies if you want to get started. What DataSafe cannot do, it cannot know your specific situation, right? And say, hey, in your situation or with the regulation that you have to follow, these are the ones that you have to have. We have some like the Center for Internet Security configuration. Yes, you can enable that. But we have some recommendations. As you can see here, it comes with recommendations for basic audit policies, admin activity policies, the audit compliance standards here, and you can enable them here in DataSafe. Ultimately, you need to see what is really the requirements you have in your environment, corporate policies, regulations that you have to follow. But we have some best practices here, or starting policies, so to speak, in DataSafe. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, Marcus. Good. Then the SQL Firewall, as I mentioned, only available in 23C, so not yet for autonomous databases, but if you have a base database, for instance, that's already on 23C, then you can use that. If you haven't heard about the SQL Firewall, as I mentioned, this is a new feature in 23C. So this really helps you with real-time protection against, very common database attacks, because we're restricting the access to the database only to you can restrict it to only authorized connections or authorized SQL statements. And it really helps you with, preventing the risk from SQL injections or access from unauthorized access points. And what you do in DataSafe, so basically you start the collection, you're saying, hey, for this user, I want to start now the collection. And what we're collecting is really the SQL statements this user is using, where this user is coming from, which IP addresses, and so on. So what that means is you're starting the collection, and then you're using your application as normal. Let your users onto the application, let them use the application. And then you probably, if you have a application, you probably have that turned on for a couple of weeks or so, just to make sure you're capturing all the activity, all the features or functions that the customers are using or the users are using. And then when you see in DataSafe, hey, how many new SQL statements do I have every single day? Once you see, hey, there are no new statements coming in anymore, that's when you see, okay, maybe I collected more or less everything and I can stop the collection. Then the next step is reviewing the SQL collection. So really looking into what are those allowed SQL statements, what are those allowed user connections. And as I said here, with the user connections, it's really about where's this user coming from, which IP address, which client protocol, which operating system user is connected as this user, etc. And here also, if you have application servers and maybe you get a new application server, you can also modify that. You can add an application server here to that list for the allowed user connections. And then the next step is enforcing it. And there you have two options. You can say, hey, these are my allowed statements, these are my allowed connections, and everything else I monitor. Might be a good idea, especially if you're starting with SQL Firewall. And we give you a violation log, so you see exactly what came to my database that was not on this authorized list. Or you can also say, I want to block everything. Especially if you think about your application servers, you probably know where your application servers are. You have the details, and then you can block anything else. Let's say my application user, my I don't know, my EBS user cannot come from any other server than this application server. And then, as I said, we have the violation log where you can then see if anything happened on my database outside of what was allowed. Good. With that, moving over to sensitive data. So as I mentioned before, we have over 150 predefined sensitive data types in DataSafe, and let me show you some examples here. So we have sensitive data or sensitive data types in all these 7 categories. So if it's more identification or biographic information, if it's financial information with credit card, bank accounts, etc., if it's healthcare information. So all these different sensitive types are there. And what we can do is we can scan your database, we can scan certain schemas to try to identify where sensitive information is stored in your environment, which schema, which table, which column has sensitive information, what type of sensitive information, how many values do you have, etc. And then when we do that, we're creating what we call a sensitive data model. You can also make adjustments to that model. And then if you have any changes on your database, let's assume you have a new application release that's being rolled out, that might also introduce new columns or changes to your tables. And then you can also run incremental discovery, so we can check, hey, what has changed on your database? Or if you just looked for financial information first, and now you're like, oh, I also need to check for, I don't know, healthcare information, IT information, or so. You can run those incremental discoveries to also update your sensitive data model. Once we know where sensitive data is stored, we can then also go ahead and mask the sensitive data. And this is really static masking. So we're really talking about overwriting your values right now. This, again, is only for your non-productive environments. So because we're overwriting the values, so never let that run on your productive environment, obviously. But here also we come with over 50 predefined masking formats. And for every single sensitive data type that I talked about earlier, we have a predefined masking format. So we already know how to mask certain data so that it still looks like that data, but it's overwriting this information. And we have very specific masking formats. So if you think about an email address or a credit card number, we have specific masking formats for that, especially for some of those, credit card has to follow certain rules, right? So we make sure that it's still a valid credit card number, but just, random digits, for instance. And then also we have very generic masking formats. You can also combine them. So with random names, random numbers, fixed strings, group masking, etc. And as I said, we have over 50 predefined masking formats, but it's the same here. If you have any requirements, you need something different, you can also build out your own masking formats. And I see one question in the Q&A. Does DataSafe include data subsetting as well? No, we don't have data subsetting in DataSafe right now. So that would be only available in the DMS package of the Enterprise Manager. Good. With that, let's go over to the live demo. So this is the first feature I would like to show you. Before I do, though, where you find DataSafe, if you haven't used it, if you go to the menu under Oracle Database, where you find your autonomous database, that's also where you find DataSafe. So as you can see here, we have the overview and then the different features here for DataSafe, where you can jump to our pages. And then let me get started with security assessment. So security assessment, as I mentioned earlier, it gives you a fleet-wide view. So you see here, what are the risks across my databases? So I have high risk in 4 of my targets. I have some medium risk in 6 of my target databases, etc. And when I say fleet-wide view, it really depends, obviously, on your IAM privileges. What are the assessments that you're allowed to see for which compartments, etc. And as you can see here on the bottom, we also include the child compartment. So I can also go here to the root compartment if I have the necessary IAM privileges. And then we're including all target databases in your tenancy. So now you can see I have high risk in 16 of my databases, medium, low risk in 21, 31, respectively, and so on. If I want to know what are those risks, I just click on the high risk here. And then I get, as soon as this is loaded, I get the list of all the high risks that we have identified here. And as you can see, we have, all these risks listed here. You also see how many targets are impacted by that risk. So if you have one risk where, 15 of your targets are impacted, that might be one that you want to look at first. Let's look at one of them. For instance, system granted or system privileges granted to public is one of the risks that were identified here. And as you can see here under remarks, you get a little bit more information on why that is a risk, what type of risk this is. For this one, it's pretty short. Depending on the risk, you might see here more remarks. And then you see the list of target databases that are impacted by that risk. If you want to see all targets, you can also click on View All Targets here. And then if you click on any of the target databases, you see exactly what is the issue here. So in this one, someone granted select any table to public. Not a great idea, obviously, because now everyone can see every single data in my database. Hopefully something you will never see in your environment, but something that happened here. You also see, how these were granted to public, if it was a direct grant, if it came from some of the rules or so. And then here on the bottom, you also see for each of the risks where this check is coming from. Is this a check from best practices from Oracle? Is it a rule from the technical implementation guide, as in this case? Is it a rule from the CIS that we're checking, etc.? So this was one database. If I check another database, it's the same risk, but here, for instance, you see here someone granted alter any role, also big risk, high risk, obviously, but a different characteristics of this risk. Good. And as you can see here, for all the risks, you see, in which category these risks are. This was a risk from the privilege and role category. We also have other categories here. I have another or two other risks in the database configuration. So we can also check here, database backup. Let me just pick one database. And here we see, no backup records found for the last 90 days. So definitely something you want to check then if you have no backups, obviously a risk. So this is one way of looking at this information. There is another way, which is the target summary. So you can also go, and let me go back to my demo compartment here so that we don't see too much data. And here you get a target specific report. So let me check one of the databases we've seen before. Here's ATP01. So here what you get is the full list of all the checks we've done. You see, some are red, some are orange, some are yellow, some are green. Green obviously means you pass that check. What I typically do is I select the risks first. So let me just select the high risk, medium risk, and then I can concentrate on them and work on remediating those risks. You also see here on the left side where these checks are coming from. So if, let's say, I'm only interested in the stick, I can, apply that filter, and then I see which are the high risk coming from the stick checks, what are the high risk coming from the CIS benchmarks, and so on. Good. Security assessment. Let me move over to another feature here, user assessment. Also here you get a landscape-wide view where you see, where did we find users that would provide a potential critical risk level or potential high risk level, etc. In how many of my databases. You also see here on top the summaries. You can also click here on critical to see all these critical users that were marked with a potential critical risk across my targets. Me personally, I find the target specific report for user assessment more helpful. So let me show you that. And let's use the same database here. So here, before I show you the user details, you get some summary information on top where you see how many of my database users were marked with a critical risk or potential critical risk, high risk, etc. How many of my database users have DBA privileges, DV admin privileges, audit admin privileges? When did they last change their password? And then also this one, very helpful. When did they last log into my database? Do I have any users who haven't logged in, let's say, over a year? Then it might be a good idea also to log these users. I actually worked with one of my customers this year, and we registered one of their databases, and we saw in one of their productive environments that I don't remember the right number, but I think it was over 60 users who haven't logged into that database in a long time. So we selected, we clicked on here, we gave them the list, or they gave the list to the DBAs to log those users then out of their system. So then if I scroll down here, this is where I get the list of all the users, and I can also, sort by the potential risk level here. So these are all the users that I have in my database that are marked with a potential critical risk. If I want to learn more about these users, I can click on a username here, and then I can drill down what are the system privileges this user has, what are all the roles this user has. And then for each role, I can also, drill down into more details. This one has PDB DBA. What does PDB DBA include? So you see all the grants here, and you can, open up any of the nodes here as well. In addition, I also see here in the table, obviously, which of my users have DBA, DB admin, or audit admin privileges. I also see the user profile this user has, or, if I want to check what this user is actually doing on my database, I can also click here on view activity, and this is integrated here with the audit or activity auditing in DataSafe. Speaking of profiles, let me show you that as well here, the user profiles. So here now I get a list of all the user profiles I have in my database with, some of the characteristics here. I have quite a few, as you can see. I have the default profile here, unlimited, failed login attempts. I have the power users where I did limit the failed login attempts, etc. And you also see how many of my users are assigned to this profile. So if you create a profile, and I just had that with one of my customers, they created a new user profile. They made sure, to set the, set some limitations on, how often you can try to log in, how long they log the users, etc. And they assigned the users in the beginning, but then over time, when they created new users, they, someone forgot about it, and all of a sudden people were assigned to the default profile that in their case also was not very restrictive. And then they ended up with, most of the users in the default profile. So let's assume I want to learn more about my default profile. I just click on that. I get the parameters here on top also, and then I also get the list of who are my users assigned to this profile. Maybe I want to change the profile. Maybe I want to assign these users to another profile that is more restrictive. So this definitely is a big help here. Good. We have about 10 more minutes, so let me also show you the features around sensitive data here, data discovery, for instance. If you want to discover sensitive data, all you have to do is you click this button here, and let's create a new model. And today is Wednesday, and we're doing the ADB Learning Lounge, so just so that I'm able to find it again. And then you're selecting your database that you want to analyze. And let me take the same database that we've used before, where actually we can also use the DS-ADP02. And then here, now I can decide if I want to screen or scan my entire database or only certain schemas, so that we're a little bit quicker. I'm selecting a certain schema here. So this HCM1 schema is where I store my application data. Next. And now here you see on top the most common sensitive types that you can select from. Or if you scroll down, you also see the full list of the Oracle predefined sensitive types or the ones that you have created. Now for this demo, I just want to select all the predefined data types. And then I can also decide to show some sample data, which might help you later with, identifying any false positives we have found. And now this is running, it's scanning your database, it's scanning, the schema that I have selected. And then as soon as this comes back, then I see exactly where we found sensitive information, as I said, in which schema, which table, which column has the sensitive information, what type of sensitive information, and so on. So.
And while we wait, there's a question, how does DataSafe differ from DBSAT?
Yeah. So the checks we're doing is basically the same checks you also have in DBSAT. How it differs is obviously, yes, DBSat is a tool you can download for your on-premise databases, or you can also run it against your cloud databases. But it is only for that specific target, right? So you need to analyze each target separately. What you don't get with DBSat is obviously the fleet-wide view. That's one thing. The other thing that you don't get with DBSat is what you cannot see is necessarily the configuration drift, right? In DataSafe, I can set the baseline and I can get notified if anything has changed from my baseline. You don't get that with DBSat. So DBSat really means you have to check your databases regularly, each database separately. Here we're doing those checks for you. You get the fleet-wide view, and you can basically forget about it unless there is a drift from your baseline. Good. So my sensitive data model came back in the meantime. So now here on the bottom, you now see, let me sort here by table. If I scroll down now, you see, hey, we found some sensitive information in the countries table, departments table, employee table, the jobs table. You see exactly where we found sensitive information, in which column, and then you also see the type of sensitive information we found, how many values. You see the sample data that I selected here. So again, this just helps you with identifying maybe any false positives that we have found. And then also if there's any relationships maintained on the database, parent-child relationships, you see that here. So you can see, for instance, the manager ID in the departments table is actually a child from the employees table with the employee ID and so on. Good. You can also still make changes here. So you can add columns, you can remove columns that you're not interested in, etc. You can run incremental discovery, as I mentioned earlier, and so on. But once I know where sensitive data is stored, then the next thing I can do is I can mask the data. And what you're doing for masking is first you're creating a masking policy. So now let me create a masking policy to show you how that is done. And we're using a sensitive data model for that. And then this is the one that we just created. And that's all I have to do here. And then I just hit this create masking policy button. This now also takes a moment. And if I scroll down, we're also seeing it's already working on it. And what this is doing is it's basically taking the sensitive data model that we had, and it's now adding the masking formats. And we don't have to wait for that. I can just show you one that I created last week. So this one should work. So here now, what you can see here looks very familiar to what we've seen before. Let me sort here also by table name. So you see the same schema, table, column names that we've identified before. And then here, what you see now, we added a masking format. So for each of the sensitive types, we added the default masking format for that sensitive type. You can still go ahead and you can make changes here. You can pick a different masking format, and there, as you see, quite a few of them. Or what you can do if, let's say, I have one masking format and I just want to make changes on that masking format, I can also use this pen here. My income value right now is, for instance, if I want to mask the income, it's taking a random value from 30,000 to 999,000 here. I can also go ahead and change those values, etc. You can also introduce group masking or any other changes that you want to do here. And then if I really want to mask my data after my masking policy is done, all I'm going to do is, let me say mask target. I select my target database, and that's it. Good. One other thing I wanted to show you before we're running out of time is how can you now register your autonomous database in DataSafe? So there are two ways. You can do that on the autonomous console, and I'll show you that in a moment. But what we also offer here is we have a registration wizard in DataSafe, and you can see here we have a specific one for autonomous database. All you do is you start the wizard, you select your database here from the compartment. You can give it the same target display name in DataSafe. You can give it a different name, and then you hit next. And then what we're checking is this a database that runs in a private VCN, meaning we need to have a connectivity option. If we do, then as you can see, the wizard takes care of that. We can add a private endpoint for connecting to your database. if we do, then we can also take care of the security rules. So creating an entry in your ingress and egress rules to allow communication from the data safe private endpoint to your database, etc. So the wizard really takes care of all these things. It also knows if we need any connectivity options. So let me pick a different compartment here. So here my database, for instance, is securely accessible from everywhere. So as you can see, the wizard then, disables the connectivity options and the security rules. We don't need that. We can just jump to the next step, which is basically hit the registration button. Another way that you can do is, as I mentioned, you also have that available in your database console. So if I go to the ATP console here and I select my database, then if I scroll down, you see also this data safe section here in your console where you can just hit the registration button. This relies on that you already set up connectivity so that you're already allowing communication, etc. So you can use that here, or if you don't want to deal with the rules, etc., then you can use the wizard, which makes it so much easier then. Good. With that, let me come back to our slides real quick. And I'm skipping. So this is just on the registration. And obviously, we also have REST APIs and other client interfaces. If you want to script the registration, you can use that as well. We do have a lot of reference customers with video testimonials, etc., that you can find on our homepage. So I'm not spending time on that right now. But let me jump here. This is what I wanted to highlight. I didn't see on your poll earlier that anyone said that they use the LiveLabs, so just wanted to bring that to your attention. We do have a DataSafe LiveLabs that goes over all the features in DataSafe that I just showed you. It has step-by-step instructions. If you want to try it out yourself, you can try it out yourself on your environment, or we also have the sandbox environment, meaning you can reserve an environment on the LiveLabs tenancy and then try it out there. Just get your hands on it and play around with DataSafe. Other than that, let's see, there are no open questions right now. Anything else, Pedro or Marcos, any questions that you wanted to highlight here?
Hey, Bettina, we have an interesting question related to some of what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So a person is asking, can an event or policy be set up for something such as an unauthorized access or deletion of data?
So yeah, hold on to that question a little bit. I'll talk a little bit more about unauthorized access when I talk about the SQL Firewall, and then also deletion of data. So we definitely, you can have audit policies, obviously, that can monitor certain objects, and we can talk about that more when we talk about auditing. Can you set up, so unauthorized access is one thing, unauthorized SQL statements or something is also something we talk in SQL Firewall. Obviously, you can monitor if someone, let's say you have an employee table or a customer table and you want to monitor what's happening on that table. You can do that with the audit policies, and then we have predefined reports that can help you with that. But maybe let's hold on, John, to that question when we talk about SQL Firewall, and then we can come back to more details there.
Mm-hmm. One person was asking about separation of duties.
Mm-hmm. In DataSafe, you mean?
Right, but Michael has replied that, and
okay. Yeah, separation of duties can be very granular in DataSafe. So we have very granular IAM privileges. So we're using the OCI identity and access management privileges here. So you can make that very granular, saying, hey, certain people can only do or look at security assessment. Others can only see, certain audit records within a certain compartment or so. So it's very granular in what you can do there. Mm-hmm. And I see there's one more question. Is data redaction still available? Is it the same thing as data masking? No. So that's why I said data masking is what we call static masking. Data redaction, yes, it's still available in Oracle. It's what we would call dynamic data redaction or data masking, right? It's really just hiding the original values. Let's say you only want to show the last 4 digits of your SSN or so. That would be data redaction. That is not yet available in DataSafe, but it's available from Oracle, yes. Mm-hmm. Can we schedule the sensitive data discovery to find out if any new types were added in the database and get notifications? Alex, yes, you could do that. Not in the DataSafe UI though, but you can use our REST APIs, for instance, to script that if you want to schedule sensitive data discovery. So yes, that is possible, just not in the UI right now.
Yeah, the first question was, does it show only the direct granted privileges or also the privileges granted via roles? I think that was related to when you were showing that, the users, right? The user risk.
Yeah, I think it might also be related to security assessments. So as you've seen in security assessments, some of those risks that we've seen, like, roles granted to public, for instance, or system privileges granted to public, those could also be via roles. So if you might remember, there was a whole huge list of, how these were granted. So yes, even if it's granted via roles, it would show up in the security assessment. In user assessment, you see the roles that are assigned to the user, but I'm guessing that the question was probably on these risks that we have identified and in security assessment, and that's, yes, they don't have to be direct grants. What's the difference between EM data masking and DataSafe data masking? So you can use both, obviously. Hopefully the UI in DataSafe is much easier than the one you have in the Enterprise Manager, but both work. So you can also use the one in the Enterprise Manager. The big difference, especially for autonomous customers, is definitely the price point, because data masking and DataSafe for your autonomous database is already included with your autonomous subscription. Enterprise Manager obviously is based on an on-premise license that you need to have.
It's been great, actually. And thank you very much, Pedro, for answering so many questions there. So I think it's been very nice. Thank you very much again, Bettina, for all the explanations and the demo. It was I think it was very, very clear. And we had some questions there already, but I think Pedro got all of them. So guys, as always, again, if you have a question, make sure to type that in Q&A. So I'll leave the Q&A open. So, Q&A is still open. So you guys feel free to type your question in there. In the meantime, and just letting you know, so again, the important links for autonomous database in general, right? And our sessions, I'm going to put them in chat to you guys. And well, that's it. Basically, again, really appreciate you guys joining us today. So final thoughts. You can always find the recordings and all the links that Bettina showed you guys today in our bit.ly/ADBLL main blog. And then if you want to learn more about or register for the new sessions, right? The upcoming sessions, they're going to be on the ADB Learning Lounge, right? In the Ask Tom interface. So you're going to notice the interface is getting, refreshed. So we got a new look and feel for 2024. And again, thank you for joining us, guys. The upcoming sessions, basically keep an eye on Ask Tom. We're going to take a break for until the end of the year. And then probably the first week of January, we're not going to do sessions. So keep an eye on the ADB Learning Lounge on LinkedIn or X or wherever you guys are getting your information on to join us on our Learning Lounge. Again, thank you, Bettina, very much. Thank you, Pedro, for joining and answering questions. I'm going to leave these open for a few minutes. If you guys have still questions, please type them into Q&A. Otherwise, really thank you for joining. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks for having us, Marcos.
Thank you.